For New Year's, I've decided I'm going to go out with a bang. Or maybe I should say I'm going in with a bang. At the risk of creating a huge mess in the comments again like I did last time, I've decided to redo what was probably by far my most controversial video. There are a lot of new people here and they haven't seen this yet. I'm going to show you a technique that loggers and wildland firefighters in the Pacific Northwest have been using to put their chains back on their chainsaws when they throw one out in the woods. It's a technique that some people get really upset about. First, I'll show you how some of the more modern woke loggers and wildland firefighters do it. Then we'll get into the way the old school professionals do it. First, the common way to put a chain back on: loosen the bar nuts, loosen your tension screw. Now we have enough slack to put it back on. Now we have to tighten our screw back up, our tension screw, retighten our chain. Then we retighten our bar nuts. After going through all that, you have to put your bar wrench away. If you call this a scrunch instead of a bar wrench, that's a little bit sus, but we won't get into that in this video. There's the woke way to put your chain back on. Now I'll show you how the old school professionals do it. For someone who's just casually cutting, taking the time to get out a bar wrench, loosen the nuts, go through all that process may be no big deal. But for someone who's out in production and time is money, they're on a fire line, they're in a hurry to get things done before whatever it is they're trying to get things done before, there's a quicker, easier way to put your chain back on. And after doing it, even if I am being a casual cutter, I prefer to do it this way because it's just quicker and easier. The first thing you want to do is make sure the chain is on the sprocket. If it's not on the sprocket, simply put it on the sprocket. To do this, you have to be on the side of the bar that the chain is off on. If the chain is off on the other side, you need to do it from this side. Or you can just flip the chain to whatever side you want to do it on. Just make sure you are on the side of the bar that the chain is off on. Now on the top side of the bar, start putting your drivers in the groove. When I say top side of the bar, I mean when you're running the saw, the chain goes this way. This would be the top side. Work your chain around the nose as far as you can go. Unless you have your chain ridiculously loose, this is about as far as it'll go. Okay, now we get to the controversial part. While making sure your chain is still on your sprocket, very important, put your knee into the bar, bend it just enough to give it a little bit of slack, just enough slack. Now you can run your chain right over the nose. I did that one slow because I was showing you how to do it. I'll do it again just to show you how quickly this can be done. Just like that, and you're back in business. Compare that to taking out a tool, doing it that way. If someone's out cutting, they're trying to get the job done, they throw a chain, yeah, you can get your bar wrench out, loosen the bar nuts, loosen the chain, then put the chain on, then tighten the bar nuts. Well, before that, you have to retension your chain, then tighten the bar nuts. Might take you a few minutes to do that, or you can do it the way I just did it and get it done in 10 seconds and you're back in business. This is a 32-inch bar. The longer your bar is, the more easy and practical this is to do. I learned how to do this on a 24-inch bar. Works fine on a 24. In that video that was so controversial, some people told me in the comments they did it on a 20, and you can do it on a 20. But shorter than that, I wouldn't even try it. I think 20 is pushing it. I wouldn't recommend doing this on less than a 24-inch bar. And I'm not even necessarily recommending you do it this way. But professional loggers, wildland firefighters, even the Forest Service, back when the Forest Service was allowed to do things that made sense, this was standard procedure, and for a lot of people, it still is standard procedure. People have been doing this for decades. If this video ends up being like the previous one I did, which was actually a YouTube short, things are probably about to get messy in the comments. There will probably be a lot of people who will tell me all kinds of reasons why I shouldn't do this. My standard reply to all the catastrophic things people say are going to happen from doing this is, if any of those things were true, we would have stopped doing this decades ago. If putting the chain back on this way in any way damaged the bar or the saw, if it permanently bent the bar, I never would have learned how to do this, because the people who taught me to do this decades ago would have stopped doing that decades before that. To try to avoid some of the mess in the comments, I will address some of the comments I got on that previous video, and mostly because maybe it will answer some of your questions. One of them being, well, I already told you about bending the bar. These bars are made out of a material, and they are made to be able to flex some and spring right back to straight. They are intentionally made that way to be able to handle some flexing. These are durable tools that are made to be used in a sometimes extreme industrial environment. These are not delicate little flowers. Now, if you were to really crank on it and bend it really far, sure, you could damage it, but we're not doing that. We're just giving it enough of a bend to get the chain to go the rest of the way over the tip. Then I got many variations of that comment. Now he wonders why his saw cuts crooked. Now his saw is going to be cutting crooked. Now he's going to be cutting banana shaped. That just brings me back to my standard reply, which is, if this caused saws to cut crooked, we would have stopped doing this decades ago. Another common comment I got was, yeah, that's easy to do on a light bar. Try doing that with a solid steel bar. I learned how to do this on a solid steel bar. We've been doing this on solid steel bars long before they invented these light bars. Whenever I do a video addressing some of the things or something someone says in the comments, there'll be a lot of people who say, don't let the comments bother you. I never said they did. The reason I'm addressing the comments is because I know these things are going to come up after I do this video, and I want to address them here. I know some people will have these questions. Maybe I'll answer some of them here. And I might have a little bit of fun mocking obnoxious commenters, but we won't get into that. Speaking of obnoxious commenters, one of the most common ones I got was, well, the reason why your chain comes off in the first place is because your chain's too loose. Actually, you don't know the tension of my chain. You've never checked the tension of my chain. My guess is the people who are saying that don't have a whole lot of experience running long bars in brushy, heavy slash conditions. These long bars especially, it's not that uncommon to throw a chain once in a while. All it takes is a stick to hit it just right, and it can pop a chain off. In that case, sometimes a tight chain can be an even bigger problem, because sometimes the stick will try to push it off, and instead of coming clear off, it doesn't have enough slack to come clear off, and it gets stuck in a half off position. That can be more of a difficult situation to deal with than having your chain come off. A lot of timber fallers actually run their chains a little bit loose. For one, it prevents that problem. It also prevents drag or reduces drag. A tight chain causes drag and reduces your power. It also causes more wear, and it can cause your bar to get hot. Which brings me to the next objection. Several people said, never do it that way because you should never touch your bar after it's been running. You'll burn your hand on the tip of your bar. If you're burning your hand on the tip of your bar, especially through gloves, that means something is probably wrong. If your bar is getting that hot, that might mean your chain is too tight. It might mean you're not getting enough oil on your chain. Could be damage to the sprocket in the sprocket. Or it could mean you're trying to cut with a dull chain. You could also try adjusting your rakers. Or something is going wrong if your bar is getting that hot. I can run my saw all day. It will get warm. Maybe in some cases it could get a little bit hot, but not enough to burn my hand through my gloves. Then there are those commenters who try to throw a little bit of a brag into it. They say something like, you would never be able to do that with my saw. I keep my saw so sharp, you would cut your hand if you tried that on my saw. And because you're not cutting yourself on your saw, that means your saw is not sharp. Instead of being impressed, I'm a little bit concerned about that person. Concerned that they may be giving a tell or projecting the way they would go about doing this. That the way they would go about doing this, they would choose to push against the sharp part of the tooth and try to put the chain back on this way, instead of doing it the way the rest of us do, which is to push the chain on this way, so we're pushing against the back side of the tooth that is not sharp. That is how we are able to do this without cutting ourselves. Which reminds me of the other commenters who say, yeah, we'll try that without gloves. You cut yourself. No thank you, it's just one of the reasons why I wear gloves when I handle a chainsaw chain. If you were to ask the opinion of a chainsaw dealer, a OSHA approved trainer, or somebody who does things by the book, how to put a chain back on, ask them about the way I just did it, I'm guessing they would tell you don't do it the way I just did it. The official factory recommended way to do it is by loosening the bar nuts. But if you were to go out and watch a logger work with a chainsaw, someone who's been doing it for decades, you would find they do a lot of things that are not the factory recommended way to do things. What you're probably going to find is they've found ways to do things that just get the job done. And a lot of times that's not the factory recommended way. Does that mean I'm saying ignore the factory recommendations, ignore what your dealer says? Not at all. What I would say to that is if you're a beginning or a novice chainsaw user, it's probably best to follow the manufacturer's recommendations or what your dealer says. Once you become proficient at a chainsaw, then maybe start looking at some of the pro tips. If you prefer to put your chain back on by loosening your bar nuts and doing it that way, there's nothing wrong with that. That's probably the way most people should do it. But I'm just trying to show you a technique a lot of the pros have been using for a long time. Consider this for entertainment purposes only, not a recommendation. Just showing you the way a lot of us have done it. I've done it that way since I was 14. As I said earlier, this is a technique for longer bars. I've never tried it with anything less than a 24. I would not try it on shorter bars. Anyway, if you're tempted to start typing out your objection of why you shouldn't put a chain on the way I just did it, how it's going to destroy this and do that, remember what I said earlier. If that were true, we would have stopped doing it decades ago.